Christian, it's Essie. I think a lot of people have traditionally looked at these moments of transition or potentially chaos when sort of a regime is toppled, in other cases, as a point of opportunity for the United States or at least Western influences to come in and sort of exploit that moment of weakness in order to get more of what we want. We've seen this recently in China. We're looking for that in Egypt. I'm wondering, are there any moments of weakness in this transition to Kim Jong-un in North Korea? Or has this really been an incredibly smooth transition that has worked like clockwork, where we sort of really don't have any points of entree?
No, I think there have been points of entree. You know, it was somewhat hurried originally. One of Kim's other sons, Kim Jong-il, the dead predecessor, one of his other sons was thought to be the heir apparent, and that was substituted. Kim Jong-un, very young, wasn't really fully groomed, wasn't really fully rolled out until more recently. The problem is you can't really wait until people are in the streets. You have to have taken steps long in advance. You know, there are instances where we have helped dissident movements, either inside the Soviet Union and Poland with Solidarity, and it's long, slow work that can take years and decades. And if you just sort of wait around, first of all, the State Department, CIA, the White House, all are terrible at rapid reaction. I mean, usually the modus operandi is to sort of sit there with your mouth open and watch. Certainly that's what happened throughout Arab Spring. I know it's what happened with uprisings in Tibet and elsewhere during the Bush administration. Washington's not good at rapid response, but in our past we have had opportunities to do better at this. We have done better in the past.
So Matt, let me draw you into the conversation as well. Reading up on the history of North Korea, it had been developing nuclear energy programs since the mid-1960s with students who were trained in the Soviet Union. We just heard Christian Whiten talking about how North Korea was a client of the Soviet Union, and then the Chinese kind of picked up after the Soviet Union fell apart. Well, Iran has the same friends with Russia and China. And I look at this and I wonder, do these countries, these regimes, make the cold political calculation that they get more benefit from being friends with Russia and China than it costs them to be an enemy of the United States? And should we take a military option here, a military opportunity when it comes to Iran, since apparently the cost of being our enemy hasn't been that, well, inhibitive?
I might be an outlier in the conversation. I mean, I look at the famous, picture of North Korea at night, where you basically see one candle somewhere. Right,
Don Rumsfeld's favorite picture of freedom.
Yeah, and I look at that, and I have a hell of a time being scared about this country. You know, if you are so incompetent that you can't turn on the lights, the chances of you developing a nuclear program that's going to threaten me are pretty small. And I realize that that's violating the 1% doctrine or some other doctrine you might come up with. Countries that are that primitive don't have a very good chance of developing deployable nuclear weapons. And I also have a difficult time understanding any kind of plausible scenario with which they would use it.
What about North Korea's threat to export all this technology when it can?
They're trying to get food. They're trying to get anything and hold on to power any way they can. And I don't understand also, Christian was talking about South Korea and kind of having fun at the expense of the previous government there. At some level, isn't this South Korea's problem more than it is the United States' problem? Isn't their attitude towards it more important than our attitude towards it? I wonder about that legitimately. I think Americans have some feeling like, hey, okay, when are the troops going to come home from there? When is that country in the South prosperous enough to take responsibility for its own defense? If it has a terrible policy of appeasement, when is it going to suffer from its own policies? And I don't see us developing or promoting that sense of responsibility among other countries by seizing the responsibility ourselves.
Well, they don't need to have much more than conventional weapons, unfortunately, to really hurt South Korea. In fact, to kill, some would estimate, even hundreds of thousands of South Koreans just with artillery, just with the missiles that they have. And this old Soviet stuff still works, unfortunately. A lot of it can last a long time. But I think part of the lesson here is just that sanctions come and go. But nukes, with the exception of South Africa, nukes are forever. Once you have them, very hard to get a country to get rid of them. You have to sort of, the regime, there has to be some sort of a bargain in place that would say, yeah, look, this takes invasion off the table. And when we're talking about sort of axis of evil countries or countries that are in the non-aligned movement or very bellicose towards the United States, taking invasion off the table is pretty appealing to a lot of them because they've seen what's happened in recent years. So again, I think that the calculation in Iran is similar to what it was in North Korea. Get them and then handle the aftermath, but just get the capability because they're not going to be able to take it away from you.